The next speaker we have on this beautiful panel is a beautiful sister named Gloria Tabi. Her research specialises in social analysis on race, black identity and anti-racism, and as a black African Australian woman. Gloria brings well-grounded knowledge and experience of the impacts presented in race and gender identities. Please welcome my beautiful sister Gloria to the microphone.
Wow, it's great to be here. This is my first time at Red Rattler, so give me, I'm finding my ways around. It's a beautiful venue. I can't believe I've never been here before. So thank you, Queen and Lizzie, for asking me to come here. When I was asked to come and give a talk about, human rights today, I thought, what will I say? What can I really add to this conversation? I'll just take a minute to also acknowledge our First Nation people for their custodianship and their love for this place that we all call home. So I work and play at the Gadigal and the Darug Nations land. So I pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. And thank you for the beautiful welcome, Auntie Jenny, earlier before. You really made my day when I was sitting at the entrance there and I saw a photo of you and Connor West that really spoke to me. Because Connor West, I'm not sure if you know him, but he's a Black American who said that, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color of this world are the most persecuted people on earth, but they are also the most loving people. And how you reconcile the two, the most persecuted and hated, but they also have so much love to give. So it was a great photo to see. So what can I contribute to the discussion of human rights? Well, I cannot speak about human rights without speaking about how racism stops us from achieving human rights. I believe the fundamental rights of justice, dignity, and freedoms, the core values that binds the entire human race together. I was born and raised in Ghana, West Africa. But when you think of Africa, you probably think about the great athletes, the athletes from Kenya and Ethiopia, and also tigers and elephants from the savannah region. Ghana is a country a lot of you may not know, and that's where I come from. It used to be called Gold Coast because of the richness in gold. Ghana is also a country that provided many nations with free labor, not by choice, but force. White people, and I know my husband is one, who are here today, you call your grandparents forefathers. Our grandparents are known as slaves. Like I said, not by choice, but force. Our country resources were stolen by the British, just like they did here. In the last 65 years is when Ghana became independence and broke away from the British rule. So when we talk about 65 years, a lot of you will have a parent, an auntie, an uncle who would have lived through the British inhabitation of Ghana. This is not very long time ago. This is in our time. So yes, Africa is poor, but when you think about the atrocities, the colonialism, which has taken place to steal our resources, Of course, we are poor. It takes time to rebuild. Many migrants, which I'm one of them, or refugees that come to Australia to live, they come here with stories and often trace back to the atrocities and theft by the European, the British, who have crippled their lands and their countries. And sometimes they have no choice but to leave. And we know very well the theft of land in this country where we stand, which has contributed to the indigenous displacement of First Nation people and their families, their youngsters, going through intergenerational traumas. It takes time to rebuild. For so long, and still, it still happens, society have turned a blind eye to systemic racism, which is debilitating effects on people. We have allowed racism to continue to dehumanize people. That stops us from having human rights. But we should ask the question, why? In Australia, the First Nation people and their youth, Black people, people of colour, people with disability, different faiths, as well as our LGBTQ communities continue to be dehumanized. Why is it the right to live freely continually is attacked? And why is it racism continue to impact so many people, even when we think that we've progressed so much? As a race scholar, I really believe that racism continues to thrive and perpetuate harm because we lack understanding of what racism is. Or shall I say, the most powerful in our society have done very well to keep us from understanding the specificities of racism. We've reduced racism to the bickering between individuals, when racism is in fact a political system of power that marginalizes, exploits, and devalue people in our society from experiencing their God-given human rights. Racism stops other people in our human family deserving the right to live freely. Because racism generates the idea of race, and race forms the hierarchical categorization of differences that organizes our society into gender, sexuality, race, and so forth. But in Australia, we've made speaking about racism a problem, when the actual problem is not understanding what racism is. So what I'm suggesting is that for us to see true human rights, we must speak of racism and understand what it's doing to help us unmask it in order to have the skills to actually dismantle it. And because racism is a systemic issue, rather than what happens on the street between people, which is as a result of a very serious systemic problem, we must pay attention to what the system is doing rather than what individuals say wrong on the street. This is why racism doesn't end. No, it doesn't. At the end, with the cessation of slavery, the Holocaust, the apartheid in South Africa, or currently here in our country, the apology to the stolen generation, racism still appears in many forms because it's a systemic issue. And we need to lay it down and be a bit relaxed about what happened between people or what people get wrong It's a systemic issue, and that's what we need to pay attention to. We see this in the unbalanced prison population, which sisters have spoken about before. So here's a few things to consider. Racism creates a standard by which everything else is compared against. Racism neutralizes groups of people and attaches them to a particular function in society. So, for example, Africans are really strong, they are runners, but a white man is a businessman. That's racism. Racism says this group think this way or act that way, and therefore they are destined to have this sort of capacity. So when it comes to the labor market, and I'm talking about employment, racism differentiates people for certain types of roles and then attach the person's function in society. So I want to ask you this question. How many white women have you seen cleaning your hotel room? You need to answer that question. Racism generates the idea of race to justify how a group is exploited, labeled, or managed. A few weeks ago, my husband, who is white, was at the service store when a white female customer was explaining in conversation to the shop assistant, who was a mixed race of Aboriginality, that she feared going to Blacktown because there are African gang there and she feels unsafe. But then when she was questioned further, it turned out that she's never actually been to Blacktown. And she's saying that because she heard it on the news, on television. So the media is also another place where racism is perpetuated. This is why I'm saying we must learn about racism in our preschools, in our schools, in our universities, in our community spaces, to understand the specificities of why racism continues to persist. Even though I've told you slavery is abolished, they've given a speech about the stolen generation, but racism still continues. So you, me, us, all need the knowledge to be able to simultaneously identify what racism is doing in systems, and at the same time have the knowledge and the skills to disrupt it at the course, at its core, from causing damage. And although I don't accept what racism's terms of references in categorizing people, in the way that it categorizes people, but at the same time, we need to spend time and invest resources in learning it to deepen our understanding and give us the appropriate tools to dismantle it at the very source. And this would then help us to experience true human rights. Thank you very much.